The thing about the damsel, and this I want to emphasize, is that it's an old world type of helplessness that feeds a patriarchal understanding of that women are born helpless, that they're born weaker, that they need to be, that their biological needs need to be governed by a government. Hi everybody, time for another archetype. This week we're doing the damsel princess, mostly the damsel. I think some archetypes eventually, if you think about like the cosmos and the archetypal structures that govern our human evolution, there comes a time when I think some archetypes have run the game. I mean, they've run the gamut. They've exhausted their use. And to some extent, I think that's happening to the archetypes that we associate with the princess, the knight, the queen. I mean, they're becoming less and less of them on the planet. I mean, this archetypal role is fading from view. And so I think we can say that the damsel her days are numbered. Let me put it that way. It may be many years, but I do think this archetype has seen better days, and now its days are numbered. The damsel, especially damsel in distress, I do remember that one time I behaved like a damsel in distress. And it's very useful, actually. But you don't want to live in that archetype. I mean, who wants to be helpless all the time? The damsel is associated with being a young, beautiful, helpless maiden that's waiting to be rescued, waiting to be helped, lost in its own forest of life. And you could see where the damsel stories came from, because, go back centuries and women were kept in homes or their huts or wherever they were until someone could come along and take care of them, because it was, let's face it, you had to go out and hunt your food, and so you would be a damsel in distress without having a warrior or a farmer husband or somebody who could take care of you. You actually really would be a damsel in distress. And as the stories became more romanticized, they were elevated to the level of the damsel princess, waiting for this handsome knight to come out of nowhere and take her out of horrible circumstances, retrieve Rapunzel from her tower, or Cinderella from her wicked stepsisters, or Snow White, But I mean, if you really look into damsel literature, it seems like many authors have in common the position that that damsel knight relationships in real life, when somebody a woman sees herself as a damsel, has that archetype, and is drawn to a knight, that it oftentimes is going to burn out, because the knight is attracted to a damsel. And a damsel is a young woman, is a young maiden type of woman. And when damsels get older, they're not damsels. It's not attractive to be a 40, 50, 60-year-old damsel in distress. You're too old to be a damsel. By that time, you have had to progress to your queen stage, to your more mature level. You can't be a damsel in distress when you're that old. It just doesn't work. It's like the maiden. The maiden is a young archetype. There's archetypal energies archetypal patterns that suit ages and stages in our lives. And they're meant to progress us through these stages. So the damsel in distress is eventually we're supposed to rescue ourselves and emerge queens in our own psychic field or our own psyche or our own life, able to become self-sufficient, or at least able to take care of ourselves, or at least able to not be so fearful. If you look at literature, for example, I mean, when the prince came to Snow White, because she bit that apple, the poison apple, she was dead. She was already dead. And many of the stories of the princess damsel knight actually don't show them aging well together or making it to the next stage. The romantic story of Guinevere and Lancelot, poof, it was a disaster. The idea that somehow or other, this helpless, this need to be rescued is associated with romance, and that it's romantic to be helpless, is the folly in this story. It is the folly in this story. And I do remember I began to tell a story that I, at one point, felt the damsel. I damseled out in a situation, but I really was overwhelmed. I ended up in a foreign country, and I didn't have my bearings, and it honestly, it was just like a British diplomat came to my literally came to my rescue, and I really did feel like this helpless damsel. And when I looked at him at one point and said, "I'm so worried," and he looked at me and he said, and he was tall and kind of a very sophisticated man. He said, "Oh, my dear, I've been in much more difficult circumstances than these." I cannot tell you how I thought everything just, I thought, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Not because I know what I'm doing, but because he knows what he's doing. And therefore, I'm going to be fine. And it was what, and I realized later how utterly grateful I was for that. How incredibly grateful I was. And then I realized, as I thought about it, once I was back home, that I really damseled out. That it was that incredible vulnerability and helplessness, which was at the time quite genuine, that literally drew that British knight to me, that helped me out. It was that kind of magnetic, because normally the damsel is not in my energy field. I don't have that kind of vibration. I would be up a creek. I've taken care of myself all my life. You can't be a damsel and take care of yourself and sit around hoping someone's going to rescue you from your own life. It doesn't work. But I really remembered that moment because I remembered how uncharacteristically helpless I felt. It was uncharacteristic. I was out of my archetypal hood, so to speak. I was out of my own nature for a moment. And I was, it's what the moment called for, but I really was fully in another archetypal pattern that I never rarely utilize, hardly ever. But it attracted the diplomat and the knight diplomat to me. And the whole situation was resolved. But my God, in that moment, I really did feel completely vulnerable and completely rescued. I mean, it was something. So because it was so out of character, because it was so dramatic, um, I remembered so well what imprinted on me was um, how soothing it was to be helped by somebody. And that could become a kind of lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? It could become and there's nothing wrong with helping each other. That's not my point. My point is that the thing about the damsel, and this I want to emphasize, is that it's an old world type of helplessness that feeds a patriarchal understanding of that women are born helpless, that they're born weaker, that they need to be, that their biological needs need to be governed by a government because they certainly can't take care of whether or not they should be pregnant or not. They're not capable of making that decision. They're not capable of any of that. They're not capable of making sophisticated business decisions. Let's just make sure they're pregnant and mothers, and then we can keep them out of the workforce. Let us just put them back in their towers where they belong so we can control them. It's the patriarchy. Let's keep them not quite as educated, not quite as able, because the female is not quite as able as the male, certainly can't make the same political decisions. Let's do all kinds of things to make sure the woman, her helplessness, her inability is what is associated with being a female. That's to me, the extreme shadow side of the damsel, is that it feeds into the shadow side of the patriarchy that wants to rule and dominate just because they're men over women, and that's just the way it should be because of biological design. And so this damsel in distressing feeds into that. You see, I really am helpless. You see, I really can't take care of myself. You see, I just read this one book from the book club I'm in, and I couldn't believe in this modern age a woman would write the kind of garbage this woman wrote about this gathering of women together and to support each other. There's nothing wrong with that. But my God, there was a whole passage in there about how this one woman says, I don't know anything about my finances. Well, I don't either. That's what my husband did. Well, he's dead now. No one, and you're broke and you didn't know anything? No, he took care of me. He took care. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be taken care of. This damsel conversation. I almost tore the pages out of the book. I almost tore the pages out of the book. It is totally okay to say to your partner, look, you take care of the finances, but I want to know what they are. I want to know what they are. Don't pull that stuff that, I'll take care of it. You just go about and chop onions in the kitchen. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Right then and there, I condemned the book. It couldn't save itself if it tried, because I don't appreciate consciously damseling out. I just don't. I think that's when you set yourself up for moments like what this book was about. Oh, my husband died. I have no idea where the finances. You know what I discovered? I discovered we're broke. How could we be broke? How did that happen? Who knows? That's what happens when you damsel out. When you damsel out. So here's another part of this. The damsel seeks a knight. The knight seeks a damsel princess. It's fine. That's how the archetype goes. One of the reasons I think that these archetypes are kind of evaporating psychically from the collective. They're losing their potency, is because they hold the male and the female in such tight constraints. They hold that pattern. A knight, a man has to be this way, and a female has to be, and a woman has to be this way. And a man has to be chivalrous, and he has to be this way, and he has to be that way, and he has to build a castle, and all that means financial, and he has to do all of this, and a woman gets to be in that castle. But this model is what this archetypal duo is all about. Is the princess gets the knight, and the knight gets the castle. The castle. He doesn't get a palace. He gets a castle. A prince gets a palace. A knight gets a castle. And that restrictiveness is not where our inner psychic field is anymore. If you really stand back and look, really observe, really observe what's going on in the human collective psyche, there is a softening of boundaries that we are experiencing. There's a softening of boundaries between, for example, what is the female, what is the male, and now that softening of boundaries is causing is resulting in a whole new way of identifying sexual genders, of a whole new way of identifying yourself, of a whole new way of expressing yourself in relationships, or how you identify as a he or she, a they. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not sure of how to use that vocabulary. The editor in me cannot say they is, but they are, in talking about one person doesn't make any sense, but that's just the editor in me. But what I do understand is the non-binary, the evolution past archetypal forms that have held us steady and in place and within certain boundaries for centuries. And part of the extraordinariness of this time we're living in is that these boundaries, these archetypal patterns that have been so familiar to us, are melting away because they no longer suit where evolution is taking our collective psychic field. They no longer suit us. We need new types of archetypal. We need to expand our archetypes. Like, for example, we never had an archetype like a networker, but we do now. We never had the archetype of the whistleblower, but we do now. Archetypes develop as we develop, as our psychic field. We never had the geek. We have a geek now. So as we develop collective patterns that emerge out of our collective experience, and likewise, we retire patterns that no longer are that prevalent or upfront. And so you have archetypes like the damsel, the princess, the knight, which are more fantasy now than fact. They more exist in storybooks than they actually we're trying to keep them alive more as fantasy stories than what we actually can incarnate into our lives. And that's I'm trying to say this, that because you know what they're like, maybe this is my best way, I hope, to explain this. It's almost as if they're becoming distant planets. They're still in the solar system, but they're being assigned to a distant orbit so that they still come around, they're still there, they're still in the orbital field of the Earth. But they're way out there because they're not as essential. They're not as essential to the modern psychic development of who we are today, and to the challenges and opportunities, and to the world that we are emerging into, which will not be a world full of royalty and knights and damsels and etc., etc. It will not. It will be a world full of human beings who are redefining their identities as people, as their sexual identities, their emotional identities. We are not just redefining, but we're exploring ourselves from a vast new frontier that we never even considered before, because there's an inner liberation that's happening. But I also think from an energetic, I can't prove any of this, and I don't even have the right language. I don't have the right language for it. But I think that where our exploration into human consciousness is taking us is into a vast expanse of what a human being is and what its potential is. A human being, not a human female, not a human male, but a human being. A human being. And I think we may be evolving into an era, not that any of us will live long enough to see it, but we're evolving into an era in which being a human being is what defines us, not our sexuality, not our biological needs or capabilities, but simply that we're human. And that if we get past all the biological identifiers and how we associate those identifiers with, because you are female, you are more helpless. Because you're male, you're more violent. Because you're female, you can't understand science as well as a male all the things that we have that come down the pike from, because you're a woman, you can't possibly be a good military strategist. Because you're a man, you can't possibly be a good holistic healer. I mean, the things that people come up with. I think it is these types of associations, these types of things that are rooted in archetypes like damsel in distress, like knight in shining armor, like old-time warriors, that in order for them to feel good, we need wars. We need wars. That these archetypes have to undergo a shift of what it is we associate with them, how we shift in ourselves. Like if you recognize, I have the damsel, but I don't want to be in distress anymore, and how I want to experience that damsel, so that I realize that I can ask for help, but I can also help myself. But that's how we kind of mature these, and I can be romantic about it, because the damsel is a romantic. That becoming more able does not make me less attractive to a knight, because I'm not helpless. This is how we start evolving these archetypal patterns. They evolve as we do, and I think that they are evolving because they have to, because staying in damsel in distress, in the classic old world understanding of it is simply not functional today. It's not functional. It's not rewarded. It's not functional. So, what I would say to all of you damsels is knock off the distress. Stay damsel, stay romantic, and realize that, you know, this is part of my youth, but damsels are supposed to mature, and they're supposed to become able to take care, because that's what a queen is. A damsel, princess, queen, grows into someone who can command her own life. You're not supposed to stay a damsel in distress all your life. It doesn't work, it doesn't help you, and nobody wants to rescue an old damsel in distress. So, if you identify that, like when women in their older age say, I'm a damsel, and I look at them and I think, no, are you serious? You are not a damsel. You're an old crone. Are you nuts? Take a look. Damsels are young. And if you identified as that, if you're young or when you were young, you need to say to yourself, actually, it's my queen years. And helpless queens get destroyed. So I need to really get that I am able to take care of myself. I'm able to take care of myself. Keep the romantic part, but remember, everything in life, everything is about becoming empowered. Everything, absolutely everything. Every archetypal pattern we have, everything is about us becoming empowered. So, for all of you young damsels, look ahead to becoming powerful queens. Okay, everybody, thank you.